thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here.
So what should we be looking for tonight?
Well, I think the first thing everybody's going to look for is how aggressive Mitt Romney is going to be. I mean, it's probably a statement of the obvious that he has a greater need to make something happen here, to make sparks fly here, than President Obama does. I mean, President Obama is slightly ahead in all the polls. I think there has not been a single national poll since the end of the conventions that shows Mitt Romney in the lead. So you have to agree that he's trailing as he enters these debates. He needs to change the dynamic a little bit more than President Obama does. From President Obama's point of view, I think a boring night would be just fine. A boring night leaves the status quo as it is. The status quo has him ahead, not by a lot, but by some, and across the board and in most swing states. So the guy who's got to make something happen is Mitt Romney. The question,
Jerry,
Alan, is how does he do that?
Well, yeah, Jerry, that's what I was going to say. That's a very tough position for Mitt Romney to be in. I mean, the way to shake things up is to be aggressive, go after President Obama. But the other thing Mitt Romney has to do is make people like him. He has to be charming. Yeah. Can you do both of those things in the same debate?
That is the conundrum. I mean, it's difficult to do both things because, you know, the history of politics tells you that when somebody attacks by whatever mode, you know, attack ads, attacks in person, attacks in a speech, those attacks often work to bring down the opponent, but they also often bring down the person who's doing the attacking. People kind of don't like it. They say they are okay with it, but in the end, they don't really like it, and Mitt Romney does have a kind of a personal likability problem. So can you attack while being a nice guy that people warm up to? That's a difficult task. I think what he's really going to do is basically try to keep the focus where his campaign has decided as a strategic matter it ought to be, which is on the Obama economic record. And if he's attacking the Obama economic record and not attacking Barack Obama personally, maybe that's how you thread that needle.
Jerry, I want to look at the latest numbers in the Wall Street Journal NBC News poll that show, as you say, Romney goes into this debate as the underdog, but that's not much of a margin. That is, 3 percentage points. If you look at past debates, it has not been unusual for debates to move the polls by more than 3 percentage points, right?
No, it's not much of a margin. You know, it's the thing about the margin is that it's stubborn. It's stubbornly consistent, you know, and it hasn't moved around a whole lot either in the last few weeks or frankly in the last couple of months. So I think what's troubling to the Romney campaign is probably not the size of that margin, but its persistence. And it's also troubling to the Romney campaign that the margin tends to be higher in some of the important swing states, like, for example, Ohio.
Yeah, so we have the numbers on the swing states. Let's just take a look at that.
Sure.
Can you put that? There you go. The interesting thing is that Florida has gotten very close. It's really effectively even. North Carolina is even. Virginia is very, very close. As you were about to say, the key thing here is Ohio. The question I have for you is, can Mitt Romney win without Ohio?
He can. It's very tough. He can't win without Ohio and Florida. He's got to win one or the other of those. If he doesn't, if he's not going to win Ohio, Florida becomes very important, and you noted how close that is. If he's not going to win Ohio, it also helps to bring a state like Wisconsin into play, to turn a state that most of us thought was more likely to go blue into a red state, and that's going to be difficult to do. So the Electoral College math, and this has been true from the very beginning of this campaign, Alan, the Electoral College map is more favorable to President Obama or to any Democrat right now than it is to a Republican. So it's a tougher task. I think the interesting thing about Ohio is that it does look to me like that one state for sure where when President Obama says, as he will tonight, I save General Motors, it does work. That does count for him, and it's probably worked against Mitt Romney there. I think if you go to a state like Florida, the housing industry is still on its back there. That's something where I think Mitt Romney can make some mileage. I do think that a lot of this is going to be about jobs, the economy, but I also think the X factor here may be the deficit. You know, I've looked at our polls as well in the last couple of hours, and a lot of the people who are left undecided or at least persuadable in this election are awfully worried about the deficit. It hasn't gotten a lot of attention. It's not the favorite topic of either candidate, but I think you're going to hear a fair amount about it tonight.
What about taxes?
Well, taxes is interesting because you're going to hear a real discussion about whose tax plan benefits the middle class. That's the whole ballgame. And Mitt Romney has started to show a little bit more leg on his tax plan in the last few days. He's tried to describe how he can give everybody a cut of 20% in their tax rate without creating a giant deficit hole that will pump up the red ink for the federal government. He started to talk about limiting people's deductions. He's trying to make it a tax cut that seems like it's responsible fiscally, and that's a difficult thing to do, but that's what he's going to have to do, because the first thing President Obama is going to say is, your tax cuts benefit the wealthy. We've all heard that, you know, a million times, more or less, so far. But the next thing he's going to say is they will explode the deficit because this tax cut is not being paid for. And if you think I've created red ink, wait till you see what Mitt Romney's going to do. He's going to have an answer to that, and I think he will.
Jerry, you talked about that limitation on deductions that Mitt Romney has talked about. The number I saw was 17,000, that no one gets to deduct more than 17,000. Not a terribly high number, obviously higher than the average deduction that people who itemize deductions have. I suspect there's going to be some conversation about that tonight.
Yeah, and I think Mitt Romney's going to have to clear that up, because frankly, I think he misdescribed his own program, or misdescribed the idea his advisors are talking about. I think there are going to be several limits for personal exemptions, limits for personal deductions, limit of deductions you can take for paying for health care costs. So I don't think the 17,000 limit is really the right number, or at least it wasn't described correctly by the candidate himself. So one of the things that I think Governor Romney's probably going to try to do tonight is clear up what in the world is he talking about there, because a $17,000 limit on exemptions and deductions is going to be a big tax increase for a lot of people who are actually claiming a lot more than that in exemptions and deductions.
Okay, thank you, Jerry.